Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. It is a lovely Friday night, and spring is here in Arkansas. Finally. I know I've said that about the past 3 shows, but I can't stand the winter. Been doing a lot of sky watching. It's been a lot of clear nights here lately. Been doing some heavy sky watching, and it's been really awesome. I've seen some stuff too. I might talk about that during the show, because tonight we're going to have Preston Dennett on the show, and I've been wanting to talk to him for a long time, and we're finally going to get the opportunity tonight, and it's great. Little bit of a close call there. He got stuck in L.A. traffic, and we thought we might have to pull a backup in, but he made it. He's definitely a man of integrity. Got to love the guy, and you can listen to him on a ton of other radio shows too. He's definitely entertaining and definitely has a lot to talk about that I think a lot of us need to hear. Also, this is a live show, so I love all you podcast listeners. If you can't come live and join us in the Spreaker chat, that's fine. You don't have to. But if you can, come on over. All the people in the Spreaker chat would love to have you. We got James in here, Deb, Craig, Tina. I'm sure Dave's going to make an appearing too, so come on over and talk to us. We want to talk to you. And like I said, you can visit our website at Lighting the Void. We are live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, TalkStream Live, iTunes Radio, TuneIn, and a ton of other directories. So we're getting out there, and we're going to be at the Ozark UFO Conference in April. I think it's April the 13th through the 16th. Me and Dave, we got a table out there. We're going to try to interview folks and, just have a good time while we're out there. So if you guys can make it out there, come on out. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter. That's at Lighting the Void on Twitter. And sign up for the newsletter so you can be a part of all the fun stuff we got coming for you. All right. I'm not going to do any news. I don't really have any special news, but Cheryl does. And after the news break, we're going to have Preston Dennett on. So you guys stick around. Do not go anywhere. We'll be right back.
I'm Cheryl Trainer for KTLK, The Fringe FM News. According to ScienceAlert.com, a team of scientists from the Allen Institute for Brain Science have, for the first time, detected a giant neuron wrapped around the entire circumference of a mouse's brain, and it's so densely connected across both hemispheres it could finally explain the origins of consciousness. Using a new imaging technique, the team detected the giant neuron emanating from one of the best connected regions in the brain and say it could be coordinating signals from different areas to create conscious thought. This recently discovered neuron is one of the 3 that have been detected for the first time in a mammal's brain, and the new imaging technique could help us figure out if similar structures have gone undetected in our own brains for centuries. At a recent meeting of the Brain Research Through Advancing Innovative Neurotechnologies Initiative in Maryland, the team described how all 3 neurons stretch across both hemispheres of the brain, but the largest one wraps around the organ circumference like a crown of thorns. Oddly enough, all 3 giant neurons happen to emanate from a part of the brain that's shown intriguing connections to human consciousness in the past, the colostrum. A thin sheet of grey matter that could be the most connected structure in the entire brain based on volume. This relatively small region is hidden between the inner surface of the neocortex in the centre of the brain and communicates with almost all regions of cortex to achieve many higher cognitive functions such as language, long-term planning, and advanced sensory tasks such as seeing and hearing. Advanced brain imaging techniques that look at the white matter fibres coursing to and from the colostrum reveal that it is a neuro-grand central station. Almost every region of the cortex sends fibres to the colostrum. It's important to note that these neurons have only been detected in mice so far, and the research has yet to be published in a peer-reviewed journal, so we need to wait for further confirmation before we can really delve into what this discovery could mean for humans. This is Cheryl Trainer, KTLK News.
Hey, Fringe FM listeners, tired of running up your cell phone bill with data overages listening to internet radio? Well, the Fringe FM has the solution. Just use our Audio Now line by calling 563-999-3921. That's 563-999-3921 from any phone.
Hi, this is David Oman with HouseAtTheEndOfTheDrive.com. You're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM.
You're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM.
Ever seen an extraterrestrial? It can be hard to believe they exist unless you've seen one for yourself. What if I told you I've seen them my whole life, but have never had a witness who shared the encounter with me? Now, what if I told you I saw 4 of them, 2 with blue skin, and there are over 20 witnesses to this CE5 event? My new book, The Blue Beings, Visitation at the UFO Conference, documents actual accounts from real witnesses, many of which have gone on record to attest to this otherworldly reality. Be a part of the quantum paradigm shift that is taking place right now. Go to johnpolkmedia.com to get your copy of The Blue Beings, Visitation at the UFO Conference, on sale right now at johnpolkmedia.com. That's JOHNPOLK media.com.
Just to let you guys know, there's somebody in the queue. We'll start taking calls the second part of the show. So if you want to call in during the second part of the show, that's 831-777-8643. That's when we start taking calls. But I do have a line saved for a special person if they call in, so message me on Facebook and let me know if that's you. All right. Now we're going to bring our guest on. Finally, Preston Dennett is on with us tonight, and he has been investigating UFOs and the paranormal. Of course, that's what we're talking about, right? He has been investigating UFOs and the paranormal. In 1986, when he discovered that his family, friends, and coworkers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. He is a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, and the author of 20 books and more than 100 articles on UFOs and the paranormal. His articles have appeared in numerous magazines, including Fate, Atlantis Rising, MUFON UFO Journal, Nexus, Paranormal Magazine, UFO Magazine, Mysteries Magazine, Ufologist, and others. His writing has been translated into several different languages, including German, French, Portuguese, Russian, and Icelandic. He has appeared on numerous radio and television programs, including Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell, Coast to Coast, and also the History Channel's Deep Sea UFOs and UFO Hunters. His research has been presented in the LA Times, the LA Daily News, the Dallas Morning News, and other newspapers. And he's also taught classes on various paranormal subjects and lectures across the United States. And he currently resides in Reseda, California. And you can check out his website at Preston Dennett, and that's 2 T's on the end there, Preston, DENNET.weebly.com. And it's really cool having you on tonight, Preston. How are you doing, brother?
Me on the show. I appreciate it.
Man, that's not a problem, man. I know you got caught in that LA traffic, and you had me worried there for a little bit.
Hey, I wish I was abducted by ETs, but no.
Yeah, man, I was like, uh-oh, something's happened to him. You know, somebody's yanked him out of the car, and now we'll never hear from him again. I don't know. Has anything like that ever happened to you? Anybody ever approached you and tried to tell you to be quiet?
Yeah, well, kind of. I've had some weird stuff. I've had phone problems ever since the beginning when I got involved in this. From the very first interviews onward, mail problems. My mail would come back opened. I did get one threatening phone call once from some guy. This was right in the middle of a really big investigation, probably still one of my biggest cases ever, which was the Topanga Canyon UFO wave. And that was back in 1992, 92 to 94. There was this huge wave of sightings.
Right on.
So I'm investigating all this. Right? I contacted the police. I was calling everybody. I was putting out flyers. And lo and behold, this guy, he says he's a colonel. He worked in the Vietnam Army as a classified satellite map reader and blah, blah, blah. He's going on and on about his credentials. I'm just like, get to the point. And then he starts saying kind of some weird stuff. He's like, what did he say? He said, after he identified me, like, you're the guy who's doing all this UFO research. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, you don't know what you're getting into. This is dangerous stuff. People have gotten hurt. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay. and then he goes like, and besides, there's no pay dirt in it. It's not what you think it is. And I'm like, well, you're kind of contradicting yourself. I didn't tell him that, but if there's no pay dirt in it, how could it be dangerous?
Right.
If I'm just, right?
You're just making this stuff up,
Yeah. And he was just trying all these different techniques of persuasion, kind of, because at that time I was in college. I had just learned, I was in speech class, and was learning the techniques of persuasion. And he was going right down the list. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting.
Right.
But that's kind of the worst. I've had people approach my table, and sometimes when I'm lecturing at a convention or anywhere, really, there'll be sometimes, a guy in a suit in the audience, and then he stands up and starts heckling me and making just outrageous debunking claims. That's happened a few times.
Oh yeah, you're always going to have that, man. You're always going to have that. You stepped into that realm the day you started writing books, or actually, you know what? Out of all the radio shows I've listened to with you on them, I asked this to everybody, and you're a first-time guest on this show, and we're really glad to have you. So I really want to ask you, when was your first experience, and what was it? Was it astral travel, or was it a paranormal thing, like a UFO? And did it happen when you were a child, or later on in your life?
Well, God knows I have searched my childhood to explain, why I'm so obsessed with UFOs, and I don't really have much. I mean, there's a couple of weird incidents, but I can't really say that, I had missing time or anything. I mean, once when I was like 5 years old, I will say this, and I've been thinking about it lately, but I'm like, how could this happen? Because I was actually 6. I would be 6 years old, and I remember being out by the side of the road along a major highway, and I cut my finger on a hubcap. But my question is, what the hell am I doing out, away from home at 6 years old? And it was since then I've always kind of been obsessed with the metallic surface. I don't know how to describe that, but whenever I see like chrome on a bumper, it gives me a weird feeling.
That's kind of cool.
So that's what I'm talking about, vague. I'm going to say I did have a paranormal experience when I was 9 years old that was really weird.
Oh, yeah?
And, it was not UFOs, but I was watching a game show. It was an old game show called Treasure Hunt, I think it was called. And they had like 70 or 100 boxes of all different shapes and sizes. And in one of the boxes was like a $50,000 check.
Nice.
And, I was watching it with my sister, Victoria, and suddenly I just looked in the audience. I'm like, that lady, she's going to be picked. And she was. And we laughed, and I'm like, oh, the canister, it's the third canister. That's where the flowers are in or something, right? And that way you got to play, and it was. And then I'm like, the check is in box. I don't remember the number, 47. And it was. We found out at the end of the show.
You had a premonition.
We just laughed and laughed. We didn't understand it. I didn't really think much of it other than, God, that was funny.
Right.
But that was it. That was it until I got involved in this field.
Yeah, that's what I mean. There's a little bit of feedback on there too. You might. I don't know if you got a headset or if you can turn the volume down on your speaker a little bit. But
got it.
My big question is when did you first get involved in UFO research? Like, what made you go, okay, I'm going to do this?
Well, it was actually I remember the exact moment. It was 1986, November. The whole family was watching the news, and on comes, one of the major news guys. I don't remember who it was, Dan Rather, Tom Brokaw, one of those guys. And starts talking about this Japanese airliner over Alaska that saw a UFO. And the story was very brief. They just kind of joked about it nervously and moved on. I later found out it was a huge sighting with radar confirmation, and it paced their plane for an hour, and just a huge case. But nothing like that on the news at all. They just kind of tongue-in-cheeked it. Mm-hmm. And I thought, my God, this pilot, because he was a major commercial airline pilot, and I thought, this guy is a liar.
Right. That's what everybody thinks right off the bat, right? No way, right?
Or maybe he's stupid and sees a reflection off the ice cap. Maybe he's on drugs. He was under highway hypnosis. But it interested me, and just barely enough to ask people. And, I remember my brother years ago. He came running into the house. He was probably 17 or 18 years old, and said, I saw a UFO. And we all looked at him and laughed, and he got really hurt and didn't talk about it. And nobody asked him. So I went to him first, and he told me a really amazing story about how he chased a UFO, a structured object with a dome on top and colored lights, which he saw close up, chased it across the San Fernando Valley with his two friends. So I'm like, wow. I talked to both his friends afterwards. So that was the first story I heard.
Yeah, I would be like, I want to see that too. And that's how I am now, but I have noticed like here lately, because when I started this, I was, like I was talking to you before the show, I'm really into astral travel, and I heard your show about that, and not really into the UFO conspiracy type thing, right? But now as I move along in the show, I'm almost 2 years into this show now, and just started using Spreaker and stuff, so it's kind of growing, but I'm starting to learn as I speak to guests that it's all really the same stuff. And I have been looking in the sky more, and all the listeners that listen to the show know that I complain because I'm from Arkansas and I can't see what everybody can see out there in the West. But now that I've been looking in the sky, I have seen things like, I don't know, for example, have you ever seen I don't know if it's a UFO pretending to be a star? Like it seems like they pretend to be little twinkling lights. Next thing you know, they're moving or zigzagging or wheeling around or something. You can't explain that.
Right. Yeah. I always tell people, if you really want to see a UFO, you just got to go out and do some field work. It didn't take me long. Shortly after I started, I got really into it. After I found out my sister-in-law saw gray type ETs. People at work, some of my friends had, were having a missing time. And so and I knew they weren't lying. So I'm like going out in the field and I'm looking for UFOs. And
right.
It didn't take long. I've had probably a dozen or more sightings, since the late 1980s. And some really good ones. Yeah. I remember probably the first really interesting, good sighting was about a year into investigating this. Uh-huh. And this is weird because they targeted me on this one. I'm driving home after talking about UFOs really intensely with my brother and my sister-in-law. I'm driving home through Woodland Hills, not too late at night, but, 10, 11, late July. This was probably 1990 or so, 89, around there. And this ball of, I thought it was a bird. This was at nighttime. I thought it was a bird coming swooping towards my windshield, but it was a round ball of light. I'm like, oh, it's a golf ball, but it's floating there, right? And I'm telling you, it's right in front of my windshield, and it moves back and forth, twice, maybe 3 times. And I'm like, oh, my God. When it kind of dips down a little bit, goes forward and goes straight up and through the trees. And I'm like, oh, my God. Into outer space, it looked like. So, and, I'm like, what was that?
How did you not? I would have drove off the road during that, man. Like, I guess, well, let me ask you this. Like, we have people that say, hey, I've never had I've never astral traveled. I've never seen a UFO. I've never seen any of this stuff. And then we talk to people like you and people like John Polk and other people that have had definite experiences and done research and all this stuff. Is there any reason for that, based on all your research, why some people have just these crazy immaculate experiences and then others, they get nothing? I mean, is it an awareness thing? Is it right place, right time? Or why do you think that is?
Well, I think those are both factors, but it is weird. Topanga Canyon is a huge hot spot here in Southern California. I grew up there, never saw anything. And I know people who've lived there 50 years have never seen anything, while others are seeing stuff up there all the time. And like my sister, she has never seen a UFO and asks me constantly, I want to see one. I'm like, well, go out and look for them. There are patterns, but they're very kind of tenuous and loose. I've looked in terms of, sex. It's evenly divided between men and women in terms of, sightings and abductions. And no bearing on race or religion or education or anything like that. So it seemed to be pretty much random, other than it does seem to track certain people or families. Absolutely.
Yeah, now with these new apps and everything we have now, it kind of makes it easier. Like, Dave Cruz messaged me one night, and he's at work, but he walked outside and he put his phone up there and he said, "Hey, look at this. Am I just flipping out, or is this star moving?" Right? And when I got home, it took me a minute, but I could actually pull up a star map and look at the section of the sky he was looking in. And so, now with all this stuff, there has been a lot more sightings, I believe, but I don't know if it's an awareness thing or like if they only present themselves to certain people. But then you look at the Phoenix lights, like the lights over Phoenix or whatever, that was unmistakable. I mean, everybody saw that.
Well, it's weird. I mean, they can show themselves to a crowd of people and pick who they want to see them.
I believe.
I remember Whitley Strieber wrote about a case where he's walking along and he sees a UFO and takes one step and it turns invisible. Steps back, he can see it, moving all around. But no, it was only visible in this one tiny spot where he was standing. So, and they know, I mean, I think when someone sees a UFO, these guys, whoever inside it, know it and are doing it on purpose, for the most part. One pattern I have noticed that's pretty strong is people who are seeing UFOs are outside. And I know that's kind of,
No, you're right. No, you're right. Go outside.
Right. I mean, a lot of kids.
We don't.
A lot of kids. Children there's a lot of children who are UFO witnesses. A lot of police officers, truckers, people driving on their highways late at night. So that's a huge factor. If you know, and living in a hot spot, I think that definitely increases your chances. There are areas that are more active. So there's all kinds of factors. And yes, awareness definitely is. And I think also UFOs do seem to be attracted sometimes to certain types of people. And by that I mean people who are into alternative energy maybe, or alternative ways of living, activists in terms of environmentalism or social activists, and people like that, people who are doing good work for humanity, writers, actors, doctors, inventors, a lot of that type of person. But it's random too, so it's hard to get a handle on.
Now you've put pretty much the most part of your life into this. You've got 20 books. Is it 20 or over 20 books out now? I stand corrected on that.
It's the 20th one has just been released, but there's more after that. So
yeah, and this latest one, Inside UFOs. What can you tell us a little bit about this book without giving it away a little bit?
Oh yeah, I've written. I think it's my 14th book on UFOs. So I've covered the field quite a bit. And what's really special for me about this book is it's all new stories, unpublished. And these are all people I've interviewed who've had really extensive encounters. So some of my books, like UFOs over California, I've done books on a series of states. a lot of it's not my own research. I'm collecting it all from a wide variety of sources.
Right.
But this is just me, and I've had these stories piling up. I've got 100 of them, 200 at least, of these kinds of stories, and I had to get out some of the best ones, I think, some of the more interesting ones.
Now, do these people that you've interviewed, do they have evidence of any of these encounters?
Oh yeah, they sure do. Well, I mean, each to varying degrees, and I think it's. I got this scathing review on Amazon right when the book came out, and the guy's like, "There is no evidence for any of this," and I'm like, "Well, there is no smoking gun in most cases, but right. Each case does have evidence." Like one guy, or actually two of these people had medical evidence. Three, one was a healing. Many of them have outside witnesses. About half of them have evidence of an implant that going to the doctor, and they're like, well, there's a foreign body here in your sinus or what have you. So there's that kind of evidence. One lady, she realized she was an abductee, and she heard that if you use a black light, you can check to see if your skin fluoresces. Has a weird fluorescence to it.
Ooh.
And that apparently this is a symptom that appears in some abduction cases. And so she does it with her friend. Her friend's fine, but no, she's got it all over her hands and completely freaked her out. So that's evidence. So there's all different kinds of evidence. Like one guy, the first story in the book, he doesn't have a whole lot of physical evidence, but right when he was taken on board, he was freaking out. He pinched his hand really hard, and it actually bled. And after the experience, he had that wound, which helped him to remember it, and still carries a little bit of a scar. So is that evidence? Well, no, not really. But
yeah, but you can't explain it either. To have somebody explain it logically, the debunkers, they always want to logically explain everything. And like you say, a lot of this stuff, there is no smoking gun or anything like that. And when I speak about astral travel, and we have guests on that talk about that, you cannot scientifically prove that. You can't. I don't know how anybody could. So it's
I wrote about that, actually. I mean, people have gone and visited places, and there are some people who can astral travel and actually appear to outside witnesses or affect instruments. Robert Monroe did it.
Yes, he did.
So I've tried to do it, couldn't do it.
Yeah, he actually pinched people. Now I've been able to, and my son, of course, I may get my son on here one day, but I actually did it, and he was in there playing video games at the computer desk. But it was weird, though. I couldn't explain it, Preston, that the video game I saw in the astral realm was not the one he was playing. So it's like your brain messes with you, But
right, yeah, I've noticed that.
The table where he was sitting at, I didn't want to freak him out, so I tapped on the table, just like a little tap, right? Just to see. And, kind of woke up, went back in there, and I said, hey, Corbin, did you hear anything? He said, no, what do you mean? I said, you hear anything weird? He goes, well, yeah, there was something that tapped on the table, but I didn't know what it was,
Wow.
And I was like, oh, so that's my evidence, But, yeah, Robert Monroe talks about trying to get people's attention and pinching them. Like he pinched a woman. I'm sure you've read his books. I know you have, right?
Oh, yeah, I've studied them. Are you kidding? I'm so into this subject, and really got into it after my mom died. I wanted to find out if there was life after death. And I did. She took me on a tour of the other side, I guess you can call it.
That's so awesome.
And I've been back and forth many times now. It's a huge part of my life.
I'm scared to leave my yard, Preston.
No, it's great. It's it's very scary in the beginning. It's a huge block for a lot of people. Boy, when you get out of your body for the first time for real and you're like, turn back and you see your body lying there in bed.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought I died. Honestly, I did.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because I was thinking, okay, if I don't get back in that body, I'm dead. That's the first thing that goes through your head. It did mine anyways. Yeah. I just don't want to stray too far away from it,
Oh, you can't go too far. You've got that silver cord. So that'll always draw you back. You have spirit guides watching you. We're all doing it every night. You just got to remember it. It's as safe as sleeping. There's, as far as I can tell, I mean, I scoured the literature looking for dangers of astral travel. And what I found was benefits instead. All these amazing benefits.
Now, I've had William Buellman on the show. Are you familiar with him?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay, so what I asked him was, I said, can you do this in groups? And, you know, because when I was a kid, I used to dream about, all right, let's all go in this dream realm together. I know it sounds kind of corny or whatever. And let's go take this psychedelic astral trip, right? Sounds rad to me. And I got the nerve up and asked him about it. And he said, well, yeah, in fact, there's a crystal statue at the Monroe Institute where a lot of people actually meet up in Locale 1.
Right. Yeah, I've heard of that. I've never been able to get there. You know, I've tried doing that kind of thing, and I've had some limited success with my sister-in-law and her daughter and my brother and some of my, you know, brothers and sisters. But for the most part, no, that's pretty advanced stuff for me.
I saw the old hag. Do you know who the old hag is? I don't know why I have a hard time saying that. It seems like it's a curse word to me. Is hag a bad word? I don't know.
I don't think so. I know what you're talking about, the kind of incubus, succubus type thing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's one of the more creepy things I think that can happen. I've had encounters with hostile or unpleasant characters. I remember one time I'm flying up, trying to get to the other side, and I feel this thing grab my ankle with little webby fingers, like 2 on each side, it felt like. Whoa, and I'm like, hey, what's that? And I reached down and I peeled it off and I moved on.
You reached down ever so calmly and peeled the fingers off and kept going. Well, I guess you got to, because like William was saying, you know, you got to stay calm and you got to stay, because the worst thing you can do is panic. It's like swimming, you know.
Yeah, well, what I've noticed, the second you feel any fear or panic, boom, you're drawn back pretty instantly. Body. So that hasn't been a danger, I don't think, because, I mean, for me, when you're out of your body, I always just tell myself, well, I'm safe. Nothing can hurt you because you're not physical.
Right.
So, and yeah, I love it. It's amazing. Flying, that's so much fun, walking through walls, visiting distant locations. But ultimately, you're pretty quickly drawn to the other side if you start doing this regularly. It's hard to stay in the physical plane, and you're pulled to the upper dimensions.
You've got a book about that too, as well, don't you?
Yeah.
Which one is it?
Out of Body Exploring, a beginner's approach, and it's my only what I would call autobiographical book. It's pretty personal, so I really let it all hang out. But I figured that was important, and 'cause, I mean, it changed my life. I can't tell you, it was like discovering a complete other world, and doubling your lifespan. I mean, you got to stay awake at night, and you wake up refreshed, and you get to learn about past lives, and meet your spirit guides, and see your deceased loved ones, and I mean, just the stuff you can do. It's outrageous.
Now, I want to get back to the UFO stuff, but I will want to ask you another question about this real quick. Is there a difference, in your opinion, in the dream world and in the aware astral, like Locale 1 world? I know that's it's very hard to answer. I know, but it's like you're trapped, I think.
I found the labels all kind of confusing. And, like the difference between a lucid dream and out-of-body experience, an actual OBE, it's still kind of controversial and contested. And like what I've noticed, when you pop out of body and think you're in the physical world, in a way you're not really at all. Because the second you're out, everything you're seeing is sort of actually just a reflection of the physical world, and that's why there are changes, and it's not always exactly the same.
Right.
The higher you raise your vibration, the more energy there is, I guess, and it becomes more and more real, and more and more bright. And I mean, the whole universe, I think, is like made of light, and the higher you go, the more intense it becomes.
Now, there is some scientific evidence behind that. I don't know if you've studied any of that stuff, but I listened to a little bit of subjects about that, about how they found out that everything is pretty much photons, and that's it. And light is the source of everything. You know, it's just all about density and relativity, you know.
Right. Yeah. And thought, the power of thought on the other side is absolutely insane. You know, they call it the astral body is also called the desire body. And the reason for that is because all your emotions come exploding out like crazy. I mean, whether it's lust or gluttony or what have you. Those were my two big problems.
Yeah, Robert Monroe talks about that. He said once he really started traveling, and you've probably ran into it too, that the sexual nature tends to take over, and he had to start tricking himself to get past that so he could keep moving on.
Yeah. I just went with it, and it would end, and then I'd move on.
Yeah.
So, that whole part's actually a lot of fun. In the beginning, I used to do that quite a bit.
Yeah, he was talking about something like oh man, it's feeding back a little bit again, Preston. When he went to this church or whatever, and the woman approached him and thought he thought, well, I was having sexual feelings. I don't want to do anything like that in a church. And he found out it wasn't that kind of church, and that woman pretty much jumped him in the astral realm. It was a trip. If any of you guys, I know I stress this enough, but get Preston's book and get Robert Monroe's book. You can hear me okay now, Preston, right?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
I don't know why. It might be on my end, but it keeps feeding back a little bit. Now, whoever is the 815 area code, I don't know. We take calls after the break, but I mean, if you want to hang out, you know. I'm not going to run you off, but I will take your call first. All right, so let's get back to your book here, Inside UFOs. It's a good title, by the way. Just to let you guys know, there's some chapters in here called Flying Saucer Sickness, A Giant Grasshopper Alien. Based on all the research that you've done, are there certain types of the same types of alien species that you keep encountering during your research?
Yeah, well, I've been doing this a long time, so I do get a lot of reports that are very similar. I'm going to say that most of the cases I get are gray type ETs, or some variation of it. But in this book, in particular, I included all different kinds. There are at least 3 or 4 involving grays. There's some involving Nordics, which are, human looking. There's some involving praying mantis ETs, and they range in height from like 9 feet, in one case in the book, about 15 feet, which is kind of an outlier, but he's a great witness, a Navy corpsman. I think he may be the one who's trying to call. I told him about it.
Ah, okay.
And also, kind of just humanoids. They're not quite Nordics, like normal human looking. I mean, there's one case involving a 9-foot-tall being who looked basically human, meaning there's eyes, nose, and mouth, but he had spiky orange straw-like hair, which stood straight up. He had an extremely huge forehead, a very broad face, a giant chin, and was 9 feet tall. So
that's a bit intimidating.
Oh, yeah. She was terrified, to say the least. So, yeah, all different kinds of ETs. And, I don't get a whole lot of reptilian cases. I mean, I've certainly talked to people who've had it, but as far as my own cases, I haven't interviewed a whole lot of people with that.
Sometimes I wonder if people are just talking about because you read it in books, too. I wonder if they're just talking about the reptilian brain, because we all have that reptilian brain or whatever. Because there's symbolism in all these old books, too. I've heard people read books that are blatantly full of symbolism and take it literally and then start a wide, massive thing about it when they miss the whole thing. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. I'm not saying there's no such thing as reptilians, but I'm thinking maybe that's what they're talking about, or they could be,
Right. Well, no, I've talked to some people who are like, no, he was 8-9 feet tall, very muscular, walked in. Some are friendly, some are not. But generally not friendly, but not all. Some I've heard 2 or 3 cases of benevolent reptilians.
That's freaky, man. That makes me want to carry around a stun gun or something just in case. Because I got a feeling the more that I research this stuff, I don't know, I think someone's going to, I think I'm going to have a, yeah, exactly. Because that's what I read in all the stories, you know. Eventually they will show themselves. If you're curious enough and they think you're ready, they'll show up when you least expect it, you know.
Yeah, it's called UFO Investigators Disease. There's actually a name for it. It was coined by Ed Conroy, who started to investigate Whitley Strieber, see if he was pulling off a hoax or if his case was real.
Really?
And yeah, not long after he started investigating it, he started having experiences. And
nice.
yeah, when you investigate this stuff, they know, they meaning the ETs, and they're on top of everything. They're keeping tabs, very close tabs, I think, on especially this subject that involves them. And like I started having experiences with UFOs right after I started investigating it, and I started surveying all the researchers, and I found out, hey, you know, a lot of these guys have had experiences. Bud Hopkins, that's how he got started. He saw UFO. You know, Brad Steiger, you can go down the list. Barbara Lamb, a lot of them.
Well, okay. Well, in this latest book that you got a lot of cases in here. Do you have like a favorite out of all of them?
Oh yeah, I'm going to say my favorite by far is the first one in the book. Yeah.
The very first one?
Yeah, the first chapter involving Kevin Kamen, who I think is the guy trying to call.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me go ahead and take his phone call. He's been on for 35 minutes. I usually wait till after the break, but that's a long time to wait. And maybe this is who you're talking about. Here, let's see. 815 area code. You're on the air with Preston Dennett.
Yes, sir. I am the Navy corpsman that he's talking about in Chapter 1.
Awesome. What's your name, sir?
Kevin Kamen.
How you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Awesome. I'm glad you called in. Could you tell us a little bit about your story?
Well, it was quite the unique experience. Look, it was 3 days involved before I was on board. 3 things that happened. My friend Larry, he and I got on the subject of talking about UFOs on a Sunday night. Now, my ship is out at sea, and we're on a Westpac cruise, which is over by Japan, Korea, Singapore, that side of the world. And we've been out to sea for about a half a week. And we got on the subject of flying saucers, and he was telling me some very incredible stories, which, of course, I'm going to find hard to believe, you know, because he's been to other planets. Right. So this was on Sunday. Now, I didn't see him on Monday, but on Tuesday, he and I saw each other, and he was telling me that he had just got back from going to my house here in Kankakee, Illinois, which is 60 miles straight south of Chicago.
Right.
And he was telling me about his adventure here. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So he starts telling me he was seeing my mom and dad's car out in front. He described a 1966 Ford Galaxy 500. Well, that's fine and dandy, except for the fact that this is 1982 when we're having this conversation. The Galaxy 500 got traded in for a Plymouth Fury 3 in 1970. And that was 4 cars ago. So why is he describing this car? Then I asked him what else he saw. And he told me enough that I was convinced, because some of the things he described was before 1970. Everything that he described was right around 1970 or before that. And he was telling me that he saw all of this. Well, of course, I'm not thinking time travel. I'm thinking CIA operative. So he's got all this information that's insignificant, but pertinent. And I know everything that he was telling me was in the past. It was not the way it was at the present. So, of course, this got my curiosity up. So I told him, I said, well, look, if what you're really telling me is true, because he kept telling me it was this extraterrestrial friend. I told him if it's true, I want to meet him. Actually, I told him this, I want to meet your little green friends. And so he says, well, I'll talk to him and I'll let you know. Now, we're still at sea. Thursday, I didn't see him on Wednesday, but I saw him on Thursday, and he told me, hey, Cameron, remember? Remember what we were talking about? Yeah. He's got this grin from ear to ear, and he gives me 2 thumbs up, because you're there, man, you're there. All excited and stuff. And my only reply was, when? And he said, you'll see. Well, Friday was the next day, and he was right. I saw him. He came down and told me that they were here. I asked him where they were at. And he said that, go up on the main deck, you'll see. And when I walked up onto the main deck, I saw this. I thought it was a star. As a matter of fact, my first thought was it was a star of Bethlehem that wise men followed looking for Jesus. Because it was the most beautiful thing I ever saw in my life.
Wow.
And at this time, I realized I want to go on board. Just seeing their craft. Because this thing was huge. It was only like 3 to 3.5 miles wide. It was hanging in the air about 6 or 7 miles away. And it was at the altitude that a jet flies, flying across the country, which is about 6 or 7 miles. And it was about 1.5 to 2 miles high. It was shining brilliantly. It was having flashes of colors, of all the colors of the rainbow. Every one of them were flashing as intense as the sun. But it didn't hurt my eyes. And there was flashes everywhere, all over this thing. It was absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely. The most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life.
So what did it turn out to be, though?
What did it turn out to be?
Yeah, well, you said, I thought it was a star. Is that all it was just a light?
No, it wasn't a light. No, it was an 8-pointed star.
Okay.
And it had lights all over the point, all the way down to where they go. Where they all join up in the central part. But, and it was humongous. I thought, I couldn't believe that I was looking at something that big. Because it's like, we're talking around 3 to 3.5 miles wide. I don't mean kilometers, and I don't mean blocks. I was on a ship out at sea. And one thing that you have to learn is be able to make an estimation on the range and altitude on different items that you see in the sky when you're reporting to the bridge, when you're on lookout. All right, so I had training in that, so I'm pretty accurate with what I'm telling you.
Okay.
And it was humongous.
Well, this is...
and so I'm trying to get away.
This story is covered extensively in your book. Is that right, Preston?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And Kevin's is an amazing story. It's pretty long, so a lot of stuff happened. But yeah, he was taken on board, and I'm really glad you called in, Kevin. You got to tell him what these ETs looked like, because.
Yeah, do you got anything to say to the naysayers out there?
Yeah, well, the only thing I got to say is be careful what you ask for. All right? Look, I didn't expect this guy to pull it off. Not everybody gets to know about extraterrestrials. I asked to meet them. I thought I was going to be dealing with creatures from another planet.
Mm.
What I got, I did not expect. They gave me x-ray vision. Then in a blink of an eye, they took me from where my ship was. I saw myself on the ship. Now, how can I be in 2 places at once? They took me to Kankakee, Illinois. I'm looking through the building of the bank where my father worked at. Now, by the time I realized where I was at, what was going on, blink. Now I'm over where my mother works. She taught school. I'm looking right at her. She's writing a sentence on the blackboard. Blink. Now, I thought I was over a bombing range in the desert. Being in the military, I have flown over them in military aircraft. And there's craters everywhere, bomb craters. So my mind was trying to figure out which one of these deserts I was in was a bombing range. And we came up over a ridge, and I saw Earth laid out in front of us. I saw the North and South American continent. I saw a cloud cover. This thing was about the size of a tennis ball. And I just thought, well, I'll tell you what I thought. I told myself not to crap my pants. I pinched the back of my hand to make it bleed, because all of this happened within the first minute of my experience. First minute.
Well, that is...
We're dealing with interdimensional... We are dealing with an interdimensional phenomenon.
Right.
All right? You want tangible proof? I tell you what, go to the next dimension and bring it back.
Right.
All right? You go to the next dimension, okay? You want tangible proof, go to the next dimension and bring it back yourself.
Well, I appreciate your call, sir. We're about to come up on a break, and I really do appreciate you calling in and sharing that with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be on board tonight.
All right.
Hello?
All right. Well, you...
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Sure. And it's just one of the amazing stories that you're going to find in this book. Right
on. Well, I do appreciate your call, sir. Thank you for calling in. That is that was Kevin, right, Preston? That's covered extensively in Preston's book. Now, is that thanks for your call. I really appreciate that, sir. Pretty amazing story there, Preston.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wish we had the time to go through and listen to him tell the whole thing. But in a nutshell, these ETs talked to him, told him where they come from, told him what they ate, told him they were in touch with all the governments on our planet and could speak all languages on Earth.
Oh, really?
That they were trading technology with various governments. And they actually said that when we started messing around with nuclear power, this is what they told him, it started a countdown clock and that our destiny would be fulfilled. And they showed him all these disasters that would happen. In live color, he watched it all. And since then, he's seen several of these disasters happen, earthquakes and hurricanes and this type of thing. So, yeah, his is an amazing story. And I'm really glad we had a chance for him to listen to him, even if he didn't get to tell the whole thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all there in the book, but it's pretty amazing. And you can hear it in his voice. Like, he was a definite skeptic when it happened, Like, yeah, let's see these little green men or whatever,
Yeah, and they turned out to be 15-foot tall praying mantis, by the way. Giant head, eyeballs as big as basketballs. So, huge.
Yeah, that's when you start checking your pulse and making sure somebody didn't slip something in your drink and all that good stuff,
Right.
Well, this stuff it's so profound. Like the stories, when you hear this stuff, I guess it's because we're so adamant on our reality, what we've been through our whole lives here, that it just doesn't register in our brain. Like, even in my mind right now, as I'm listening to him, I'm still thinking, there's just no way. And he's probably telling me the truth,
Well, I hope he is. He's a Navy corpsman, and people are depending on him to
right.
save their lives. And so, I mean, in that respect, he's a trained observer and a pretty good witness.
Do you think that when we set off those nuclear bombs and like Fukushima and stuff, do you think they saw that, or that triggered something in them? Like, whoa, now what are these guys doing?
I'm sure they're very well aware of every nuclear development that's going on since the dawn of the nuclear age, which coincides exactly, of course, with the modern age of UFOs. With no coincidence, as many researchers have pointed out. Yeah, they're all about nukes. We've seen them hovering over our nuclear missiles, which they shut off. Over various nuclear power bases, the Indian Head power plant in upstate New York, Palo Alto in Arizona, the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant in California, all have had sightings. So I think they're all about nukes and nuclear power, and we're keeping very close tabs on it.
I'm curious now, how do you find these people? Like all these, I know you're a researcher, obviously that's your job, but how do you end up finding all these people that have these experiences? Do they come to you?
For the most part, it started out with my family, friends, and coworkers, and that was actually my first book, was mostly just that. But since then, I've built kind of a network. One lady I worked with for years, actually, and she comes to my desk. I don't really advertise that I'm a UFO guy, and that was actually towards the beginning of my research. She comes into my desk and sees this little statue of a gray sitting there. Someone had given it to me, and she screams, lets out this loud yelp and points at it, and she's like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "What do you think it is?" And she says, "Well, I don't know, but I saw this thing. I saw something just like that." And so, I mean, that's one way. A lot of people at work, sometimes I'll just be in line at the post office or something at the bank, and the subject comes up, and I mean, all different ways. Weird coincidences. Sometimes when I speak, well, pretty much every time I speak, people come up and they want to share their stories. And now that I've got 20 books out, I've got stories coming steadily.
Yeah, I can tell it in your voice. It sounds like that there's so much on your mind and so much you want to say. You just don't have time to say it all. Like, hence the book writing. That's probably the only way you're going to get it all out. I mean, how much info do you think you have right now that hasn't been told, that you're still just waiting to tell?
Oh, I've just touched the tip of the iceberg, honestly. I hope I live long enough to get it all out.
That's what I thought. Now, you told me before the show, you didn't have time for it, but you used to do your own radio show back in the day, didn't you?
I did for about a year. It was an incredible amount of work, but it was so much fun. Oh, yeah. Got to talk with all kinds of people. I got to put a lot of my witnesses on the radio. So that was also a lot of fun. But yeah, it turned out to be, it was taking up my writing time and cutting into, the projects that I wanted to really get out. So I eventually just gave it up.
All right. Well, I understand that. I understand the lot of work thing, believe me. Dave and I, Cruz, we both do a show and run a network too, so we both kind of, well, at least I know I did. I was like, oh, man, this is just going to be fun and a blast and yada, yada, yada. And it's a 24/7 thing you've got to keep up with all the time,
Definitely, yeah.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about time travel, but we need to take our first break, so we can do that when we come back. If you guys hang around after the break, we'll start taking your phone calls. If you got any questions for Preston, we're going to ask him a few more questions, so stick around, guys. We'll be right back.
This is Lighting the Void Radio with your host, Joseph Roop. It's the show about truth-seeking and freeing the spirit, shattering your limited beliefs, revealing hidden truths, and much, much more.
Greetings, everyone. This is Dave Cruz, your host of Beyond the Strange Radio. Join us every weekend, 7 p.m. Pacific Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. We'll have interesting guests, bizarre topics, and the chance for you to share your stories and experiences. From paranormal phenomena and Sasquatch to conspiracies and little green men, this is the radio program for you, the listener. Broadcasting from Spreaker and the KTLK digital network, thefringe.fm, on TuneIn Radio and TalkStream Live. Remember, don't be a stranger, just be strange. Hasta.
This is Reverend John M. Polk from johnpolkmedia.com, and you are listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM.
We're back. Gotta love the chat room. The people in the Spreaker chat room are awesome, by the way. If you guys want to, over there on TuneIn, jump in the Spreaker chat. It's pretty entertaining. This is Lighting the Void. If you're just now tuning in, we're on the air with Preston Dennett, and we are talking about his new book, Inside UFOs, Aliens, and now I want to move into time travel. The phone lines are now open, so if you want to call, it's 831-777-8643, 831-777-VOID, and you can call on the show and ask Preston your questions. Preston, that's a topic I really wanted to touch to as time travel. Have you had any experiences with that yourself, or talked to anybody that had experiences with time travel?
Well, I haven't. Well, I guess maybe if you count precognitive dreams and when you're going out of body, that sort of thing. Yeah, I have had that going into the past and the future. So I guess I'm going to say yes to personal experience and definitely yes to the people I've talked to. And I mean, Kevin Camen's case is one. He believes that he time traveled with these ETs and certainly saw the future as well. And
you could hear him saying, "How in the hell can I be in two places at once? This don't make sense," you know?
Yeah, it's definitely strange. Time travel seems so science fiction-y to me, but you're kind of stuck with the stories. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of the grandfather paradox, where say you go back and shoot your grandfather. Well, does that mean you no longer exist?
Well, I mean, I've never heard it put quite that way, but yeah, I do think about that kind of stuff.
And I'm not sure that's going to be a problem. My guess is there's multiple timelines and alternate realities, but I'm not sure. I have a real hard time getting a handle on it. But one guy I talked to, his case is in the book. He was just, I think, was 11 years old when his mom sent him out to mail a letter. This was in St. Louis, Missouri, right along a busy street. And he walks just a couple of blocks to the store in the mailbox, drops the letter, and is walking back when, boom, he sees this UFO hovering right over him. The street, which was crowded with cars, now has no cars on it, which is pretty much impossible. And there's a flash of light, and he's got missing time. Runs home, and his mom is furious, like, "Where have you been?" But he's totally excited because he feels completely different. He feels as if a veil has been lifted from his mind and he's been enlightened in some way. And in the days that followed, he started to remember seeing these handsome Nordic ETs wearing jumpsuits. He's inside this very clean-looking UFO, or room, rather, but we're assuming it's a UFO. And they had this long conversation with him that he doesn't quite remember, other than it was very deep and very philosophical and had all these amazing concepts to it. And this started his lifetime of contact with usually grays. And there's this one incident. I mean, he was having missing time, and they moved to a farm, and he started seeing weird deer and owls, and would kind of meditate on it and realize, no, those weren't deer at all. Or he'd just break through this kind of screen memory or amnesia. And one time, he's out with the whole family. They're out in the front yard when this UFO shows up. Pretty close. It's a classic flying saucer with lights on it. And he decides he's going to run inside and get his rifle, which has a scope on it, so he can get a real close look at this UFO. He's not intending to shoot it, obviously. But he runs inside, gets the pistol, and sees the UFO, looks at it through the scope, and it's gone, puts the scope down, and can't find the UFO, looks over at his mom and dad, and they're not moving, and no one is moving. Nothing is moving at all. He sees his dad is holding a bucket, and it's got the milk splashing halfway out, and it's frozen in time. So, and here's the problem, though. He's running around. He starts panicking, and he's like, what is going on? How can this be happening? And he turns, and he sees that there are 3 grays walking down the driveway, and the UFO's landed in his front yard. The door's open, and they're walking out and walking towards him, and that's pretty much all he could remember. But my question is, they're stopping time? What is going on here?
That's freaky.
I know.
That's like I don't think I've had that kind of experience back in my 20s when I did acid once. I thought I was trapped in this weird realm. But anyways, we won't go into that. But if that happens in real life, yeah, that's a trip. But I mean, we both heard shows about, you know, time travel and you know, Tidor and all that stuff. It's let's think about the probability of it, right? If there is a probability that time travel is real, then there's a definite probability that they're already here. That paradox, you know what I mean? Like, it's already happened in the future, so they came back. Had to be. So it's got to be real. That's the way I look at it. I don't know if I'm making any sense or not, but you know what I'm saying? Like, in the future, somebody's going to do it. So if they do it, then that means they've already went back into the past. They've probably already walked among us, you know. This is too high a probability. I mean, the scientists have already said it's possible. They're smashing atoms together right now trying to figure it all out. But
yeah, it's a bizarre concept to have to deal with because it makes history and all of the universe much more fluid and complex, for sure. I've talked to several people who've had weird experiences like that. One lady, this isn't in the book, it's in another book, my book, UFO Healings. She was in a car accident in Georgia, was thrown through the windshield and onto the street, and everyone could not understand how her face was not scarred at all or how she even survived. But she remembered being taken on board a UFO and healed. And they told her that she had died in this accident and that she wasn't supposed to. And they healed her brainstem and some other stuff, but not everything, and put her back. And here's the weird thing. The accident happened and the ambulance showed up right away. And they had her aboard this UFO for about an hour. So they somehow shrunk time, or, you know, I don't know exactly how to describe it, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They have these abilities. It's crazy. There's a chapter in my book, Not From Here, The Incredible Shrinking Abductee, because they have the ability, and I know how this sounds, but I've got like a half dozen or more cases where they shrink people down. They can shrink their ships. Kevin Cameron, the guy we talked to, he told me it was weird, Preston. The room that I was in kept changing size. And I've talked to other UFO abductees, I'll call them. And one guy I talked to, he actually asked the ETs, how big is this UFO? Because it kept changing sizes on him. And they kind of laughed and said, oh, it's as big as we need it to be. They have the ability to control space or the size of their UFOs. And there is one case, I have to squeeze this in, from Leonard Stringfield, the pioneer of UFO crash retrievals. And he talked to a military guy, who was taken to see a UFO on a military base, and it was his job to photograph it. It's about 35 feet across, and he's photographing it, and they tell him, photograph the inside. Goes inside, and it's vast inside. It's like a stadium, much bigger than it was on the outside. So that's the kind of technology that these guys have.
That's incredible. But, you know, they just found the new planets. Those planets they say there's life on. It's like we're slowly finding this stuff. I mean, inch by inch. But yet, I'm sure that it's all happening right in front of our faces. You know, if they can shrink time, then they can obviously appear to who they want to appear to. But here's something that I wanted to ask you about. And I don't know if anybody's asked you about with your latest radio shows, but I've had Joe Cerletti on, and we also talked about the George St. Pierre, who's in the UFC. I mean, a UFC guy and the Ultimate Fighter. Everybody knows this guy. He was the champ. And he talks about a missing time experience. He said he felt like, and Joe Cerletti confirmed this, he felt like that he was a fish pulled out of water. And have you ever spoke to anybody or had any experiences like that yourself?
Not myself, but yeah, people try to use different ways to describe it, and it's very difficult. I can see them struggling, you know, to find words because there really aren't any words that to describe the way it feels, I think, when people go through that missing time experience or being pulled aboard a UFO even and remembering it consciously. You know, in the book, actually, most of the people I talked to remembered their stuff consciously, at least some of it. Only 2 cases involved regressive hypnosis, you know, which I believe in. I mean, I'm not bashing hypnosis. I think it works, and there's proof of that. Mm-hmm. But I just don't want people to think, hey, this is false memory syndrome. You know, these people are making this stuff up through regressive hypnosis. No, they're absolutely not.
Well, the biggest question, and I'm sure what a lot of people want to know is, why are they here? What's the agenda, you know? I mean, I just watched Arrival. I would like to think that, I'm not going to give that movie away. I would like to think that that's what their agenda is. But what do you think?
Well, I think it'd be naive to say they're going to save us, because they're not doing that. I mean, demonstrably, people are dying of disease and hunger and all kinds of stuff. And I don't think they're here to destroy us either. There's really no evidence of that. If they wanted to, they could have millennia ago. So my guess is most of them are scientists and tourists and laissez-faire for the most part. They're studying us, except for maybe the Greys, who aren't laissez-faire. They're taking people pretty actively, and still are, and doing their genetic agenda, which is hybridization. I totally believe that's the case.
You mean they're trying to interbreed with us or something?
Right. Which I think speaks to who they are and how close they are to us, maybe. There's a lot of accounts where they're possibly from our future. I'm not sure that's the case. But whatever the case is, they are interbreeding with us. I had cases well before Bud Hopkins came out with his book Intruders, which outlined that whole theory. And I'm like, okay, you know, I have cases like this too. And continue to get them. There's 2 cases like that in the book. So I think that's definitely one of their agendas. But like everyone out there, I mean, we all have multiple agendas. I think their main agenda, and this, I'm speaking of all of the ETs for the most part, because this is what I'm getting the most, is when someone's taken on board, you know, they're physically examined, yeah, genetic material is taken, but if they're given a message of some kind, it usually falls into one of 3 categories. It's either about alternative energy, say people are taken to the engine room, that's not at all uncommon. And there's the ETs show them, look at, you know, this is how our craft works. We use electromagnetics. You don't need to use fossil fuels, this sort of thing. There's a really interesting case in the book where I talk about this guy, electronics Navy specialist, who had that exact type of experience and ended up actually making this sort of perpetual motion device, which seemed to work, at least pretty well. So that's a major agenda. And the 2 others, one is giving warnings, usually of a nuclear proliferation, that's huge, but not just that. Pollution, overpopulation, global warming, war, crime, and violence.
Right.
Though, over and over again, I hear that. And thirdly, and this is kind of a broader category, which I would lump into sort of spiritual or alternative topics, like alternative healing or out-of-body experiences, or even, you know, past lives. Psychic development, and by that I mean, and this is true for a lot of the people in this book, people who come away from these experiences changed. And one guy became a water dowser, one guy does psychic readings, one became very interested in hands-on healing and is doing that. You know, some become channelers. So there's this weird whole transformation aspect, and that I think speaks to their agenda. They're very interested in all things human. I'm not sure why, but they love us and can't take their eyes off of us. They're very interested in our emotions, and they're very interested in those 3 things: alternative healing, alternative energy, and spirituality. Right. Warning people. So those, I think, are their main agendas, but there's a bunch of them. I did a chapter on my book, not from here. I forget which volume. There's 2 volumes. But it covered cases where UFOs hover over mines, metal mines.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Like the resources we have on this planet. You know, if you go back to the Inky story, it kind of shows they were after the precious metals and stuff like that.
No doubt there are. I've got like 30 cases. It's crazy because these things are targeting these mines. A lot are seen just hovering over them. Some are seen sending beams down. Some are seen landing. There's a bunch of cases involving humanoids, and they're actually digging in them, carrying buckets even. It's really, I think, conclusive. In Colorado, not Colorado, rather Arizona, sorry. Arizona, it turns out it's the leading producer in the United States of copper.
Yeah, and so UFO sightings as well, it seems like.
All the copper mines and the smelting plants even have had major sightings over them, repeated. So they're definitely interested in our metals, and the boogers are taking our metals away from us and have been for years.
Yeah, they're probably watching the market go up and down too. Probably trading the Forex. All right, Preston, are you ready to take some questions? We got some callers here lined up in the queue.
All right,
let's see. All right, you're live on the air with Preston Dennett. Do you have any questions or who are we speaking with? How about that?
Hey, Joe, it's Dave.
Hey, Dave. When I see anonymous, I don't know if it's you or Dino, so that's why I asked that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm calling from Skype.
That's cool, man. What's going on?
Hey, first of all, I just want to say, hey, Preston, how's it going? It's really great to talk to you, man. I've been following your work ever since I've heard you on Jimmy Church's show, Fade to Black, way back, a long time ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that was a while back. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, I was actually, I had a question about that because I remember when you guys were talking about a lot of the UFOs off the California coast. That was around the same time as the deep Malibu underwater base.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Would you, was there ever any follow-up on that, or do you have any more information about that?
Oh, God, do I. In fact, you scooped me. That's the subject of one of my upcoming books, hopefully to be put out later this year or next year.
Well, good job, Dave. You scooped
It's the stuff I'm getting on that is crazy. I initially wrote a chapter about it in UFOs over California and expanded it to an article in Fate magazine. This was back in 2006, which I called "Is There an Undersea Base?" Off the California coast. So I was the first guy to put this forth because by then, back then I had like 50 cases, and that was over 10 years ago. I lectured on this subject. I went on Deep Sea UFOs 1 and 2, and all that brought in a whole bunch of reports, and it hasn't stopped in that area. I mean, you cannot go a mile down the Pacific Coast Highway stretching from, the southern end towards Seal Beach and Camp Pendleton, that whole area, up towards Santa Barbara and Vandenberg Air Force Base. Mile for mile, it's got to be one of the most active USO, under unidentified submersible objects, areas on the planet. And not just, sightings, but landings, these things coming in and out of the water, humanoid cases. I just talked to a guy who had this amazing humanoid case. I'm going to hopefully interview him this weekend. And boy, the book I'm going to put out on this is going to blow people's socks off. I just knew there was a base there. And early on, people started calling me up or emailing me about images off the coast of Malibu. And finally, it was Jimmy Church who really broke it out into the open and got some very, kind of enhanced images, which showed what appears to be this base right where I said it is. So, yeah, got a lot to say on that.
Wow, that's really cool. I got a follow-up question, but it has to do with a different subject, and I've been meaning to ask a couple of people about. Well, I know Linda Moulton Howe. I know you're familiar with her, but I'm not sure if you've actually done work with her. But what is your opinion about cattle mutilations and UFOs?
Oh, that's a good question. Good question.
Yeah. Well, I've certainly looked into it extensively. Having written UFOs over New Mexico is kind of when I really first looked into it. And just recently putting the finishing touches on UFOs over Colorado, which those two states are really hard hit. First of all, there's no doubt this is real. Cattle are the hardest hit, but it involves all animals, as far as I can tell, and other researchers. I'm not sure if this is being done exclusively by ETs, but I think absolutely ETs are involved, or some ET group. And when I say ETs, that doesn't mean they might not look like us, or for that matter, be some breakaway human civilization from the far past who had technology and fled Earth and are, now technically extraterrestrials. And but I don't know, it's weird. There's some weird satanic, dark aspects to it, which make me wonder if it might not be like the Nazi flying saucer guys pulling one over on us.
What makes you say that satanic aspects? Right. What makes you say that?
It's just some of the stuff that happens is really bizarre, and there seems to be there's some ritualistic aspects to it.
Okay. Ooh, that's creepy.
And it's one of the major theories that, Satanists are doing this. But what if we're dealing with, kind of extraterrestrial Satanists, if you know what I mean? I don't quite mean it that way, but
well, correct me if I'm wrong here on this one. Didn't they have the mutilations, some of the experiments they did, that there was really no way that any person could have, unless they were a surgeon, done it the way that they've done it on certain instances? I could be wrong about that, but
no, that's the general rule. Actually, these are done with. It doesn't appear to be lasers, but it's something very similar. The blood is drained from these cattle in a way that not even a drop is spilled. Some of these cattle have been found up in trees.
That is crazy. And
no footprints around them. And here's the weirdest thing. Generally speaking, predators won't touch them. And when I say predators, way down to flies and maggots. This thing just lies there like a mummified. I mean, how do you explain that?
So like coyotes and nothing will touch them after this. Is that
right? No flies will land on them. No coyotes. Nothing comes near them. Generally, and usually, this stuff gets a dead animal. Does not last a day. It gets chewed up pretty quick.
Wow.
If I'm not mistaken, Preston, is it true that, or have you've also found out that these mutilations, these experiments that are doing on not only cattle, but I have heard in some cases humans, maybe a couple of cases where humans there were similar experiments done on them as well, but that these experiments are done while the animals are alive still.
Yeah, there are some scattered cases of what I guess you would call that vivisection, and I have heard of some cases involving humans. Apparently there was a morgue up in upstate New York that was hit, and there was another case in, I forget, Arizona, some desert area on an air base where two soldiers saw a UFO, and one guy was scooped up, and he was missing for quite some time, and they finally found his body, and it was not pleasant.
Yikes.
So, yeah, this, I think, probably does happen. I'm not sure how common it is. But here's a weird thing. I wrote about this as well in my book, Not From Here, UFOs over graveyards, a whole chapter on that. These UFOs are seen hovering over graveyards pretty regularly, landing in there. There's humanoid cases. Graves are being disturbed. So I think they're pulling up genetic material, honestly, or doing human mutilations after the fact, after death. So I don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff going on, and the cattle mutilations is definitely one of the more kind of mysteries that we still haven't fully solved. Some people still think it's humans doing it. There's lots of black helicopter activity. My guess is that humans may be allowing this to happen or are participating with it in some cases. And the main theory in the community actually is that the ETs are doing this to take the genetics from cows and are either using these genes to build, creatures, whether themselves or greys or humans or what, we don't know, or that they're testing levels of pollution and nuclear radiation, because the area where the highest density of mutilations are does coincide with an area that had a lot of nuclear fallout on it. So that's a possibility.
Well, Preston, I want to thank you for taking my questions and my call, Joe, also, and I look forward to reading more of your books, Preston, and thanks again.
Thanks for calling, Dave.
Hey, it's a pleasure.
All right. Have a good night, guys.
You too. That's Dave Cruz, everybody. And yeah, he's coming back to the network. All right, let's see what we got here. Someone's been waiting a while here. Okay, 402 area code. You're on the air with Preston Dennett.
Me?
That's you.
Am I on?
You're on.
Hey, it's Chad me.
Hey, what's up, Chad?
Chad me. Hey, Joe.
That's who I was telling you about before the show, Preston. Chad Meek. His uncle is George Van Tassel.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah, hi, Preston. Yeah, a couple of comments. One, with all these copper mines, there's also associated metals. Also, Arizona and Colorado, there's huge uranium deposits also. And the other thing too is platinum and palladium. And so the reason for the West, at least is what I believe, is just simply because of all the various metals, and that they can basically extract and what have you. As far as that would be my thought. But also just commenting on a personal level, I had this out of body experience, and really in a spontaneous healing situation. As far as on that too, I remember one time, of course, my whole history is and my whole family out at Giant Rock, we all had abduction experiences and things like that, and so it really does transform you. It ruins you for a lot of materialism and things that everyone else likes, your taste and all that stuff. It's just a weird thing. But I had boils the size of golf balls underneath my armpits. Had no idea where they came from. This was in the 90s, and they were under my crotch, and I mean it was pure hell. If you can just imagine, almost tearing yourself apart. Went to the dermatologist. Had no idea what it was. I mean, they had no clue. They said, well, put Calamine lotion on it, take some, take these drugs. Well, anyways, whatever, everything didn't work. And so subsequently, what I did is I actually got into a meditative phase, and just intuitively, and I kind of got I kind of had this intuitive relationship with my uncle, and of course after his passing, and he had mentioned to me, he said, listen, just getting a turn off the lights, get in the bathtub, and just start breathing and count backwards 10 to 1. And so I did that. And so consequently, to relieve some of the pain, of these huge, gigantic boils. I mean, it's just one of those things. And I had this huge out-of-body experience. And, just kind of propelling myself up through the universe, and it was an incredible experience, and just very, very majestic. And then I got to a point, and at that time I was actually asked by some entity, I don't know what, and they said, listen, if you continue on this path, what's going to happen is you won't be able to come back. So you need to decide now whether you want to keep going or not. And so, of course, you had kids and wife and all that stuff, and I've often wondered whether I made the right choice. I said, no, I want to go back down. So, and automatically, whatever wormhole I was, I just was, back in my body. And, and I really, felt completely, almost like being under anesthesia, and was completely refreshed, but not a trace of any oil anywhere on my body. Everything was gone. I was completely fixed and never had another problem with it. So, what you were mentioning as far as some of these weird experiences, and it continues. Mine started at 4. So, obviously in my book, I have about I kind of speak for a character named Chase, and I've had a lot of extraordinary, not only psychic events, medical events, all this other stuff. It just happens, and you get transformed. And everyone always asks, well, why you, and all that other stuff. And it's, of course, the question the ages, if you've been an experiencer, is that you kind of always wonder, so well, why is it me? Well, there's a whole litany of reasons. Number one, I was out in an area where people were channeling regularly and actually bringing in ships on a consistent basis. So I was fair game out there in proximity. So that probably had a lot to do with it. But I guess they could have chosen. They could have chosen other people, but that had a lot to do with it. I mean, and I literally, there's some people, my uncle included, she's pretty much, I from my research, he's literally like kind of the granddaddy, and a lot of people's, books and things like that. I see all of the information that was, presented to us, in the family and what have you. This goes from, to literally from Stephen Greer to David Wilcox. I mean, you name it. I mean, I'm hearing the same, information that went on out there. So, but it's really interesting listening to what you have to say because, especially underground bases. I am sure, and I live in Ensenada, Mexico. I'm up here in Pismo Beach right now, but I live in Ensenada, Mexico, and I am convinced there's one because I've seen sightings come out of the ocean, and a lot of the indigenous around there, they've got strong, decades of the belief that there is an underground base out there, and I've had, I've had about 5 sightings right outside my house in the Pacific Ocean. And on one of the films I have called The Real Truthers, I interviewed a guy named Bruce Noon, and he lives right at the point of this whole thing, and he's had some incredible experiences. Now, again, when you talk about credibility and all this stuff, this is a guy who literally had a competing operating system to Bill Gates. Okay, in fact, there was IBM was making a choice between this guy's operating system and Bill Gates. Okay, and I mean that's how advanced, how brilliant this guy is, and his credibility is just unquestionable. As far as that, and I got him on film talking about his experience, and again, we've been comparing notes, and there's something out in the ocean, and it's extraordinary. I've actually seen a lot more increasing. I mean, I just had a sighting about 3 nights ago at around 7:05, and it's like one thing that's completely perplexing me is like I'll send my dogs. And my dogs, I have Great Danes. I put them to bed. First thing I do, I send them out in the backyard. And of course, they have to do their business out there. And so I'm just looking up in the sky, and lo and behold, around 7:05, I saw this really bright orbital, thing going. I thought, oh well, I continually second guess myself and always try to disprove it. Well, that could be like a satellite or something like this. I said, well, that's an awfully big satellite because they're little tiny. You can see them; they're really tiny. And this is a really big one. And then usually I can follow them for a long distance. Satellites. This one disappeared. And so when they go poop or they get irregular, what have you, so then I know it's either. Again, it's either one of ours, one of the skunk work deals that are going on, which I know, which based on my research, there's a lot of them out there, or extraterrestrials and what have you. But one more comment, and you can.
You two definitely need to sit down and have a talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will. But one comment. This is one thing I've come through too, and this is something that within our DNA we have this very, very powerful God spark. I'm convinced of it. The more I meditate, the more I get, and the information I'm getting is that the human being is one of the most attractive entities, limited. Okay, and we don't know our own power, which is clearly evident by we're only using XYZ amount of of our brain power. But there is something by design that we have, and I think we have this information that's within us And that I think that, with perhaps a pulse wave or something, I think we're getting fairly close to it as a race. And, as a human race, that we're going to get this pulse rate, and I think it's going to activate that DNA within us. And I'm very excited about it. I really am. That's why I'm just I'm throwing everything, as far as for total UFO disclosure and whatever. But I think on top of that, in preparation for this and trying to make as many people aware of my own, condition or in my own experiences and as well as others, because that's what I do too. I've done a lot of work with other, fellow people that have had abduction experiences and things like that, because they're difficult to deal with. But I think we're coming close to something, and it's, I just sense this, and I think it's going to come through some sort of pulse wave that's going to activate this DNA, this information that we have within us already, and that's why I think the Greys and all, and as far, especially them, which I was abducted by the Greys, I believe that's what they're trying to duplicate, with, and they're not, it's something I don't think they'll get it, but because it's in us innate, and I think it was placed in us as our safety valve, as part of this grand universal experiment that we're at. Anyways, that's my take on it. It may sound a little wild, but I really believe that, I just think, I marvel at it. It's kind of like we all need to kind of click our heels. It's kind of like the whole Wizard of Oz thing where, the good witch of the West comes and says, the power's already been in your shoes, click your heels, and, you can go home. I think we're very close to that, and so I am positive. I mean, it's funny, in this crappy, lousy world, I mean, it's just nothing but upside down lies. I just think there's some grace involved in, and I don't want to sound evangelical, as far as that, but I just, at least I'm hanging on to that because, I mean, I'm thinking with all the incredibly, it's just like, you can't make this stuff up that's out there, and we're in need of support. So anyways, I'll shut up and get out of the way. But I can go on forever.
I know.
Anyway,
Chad's got
enjoy
a lot of stories. Lots of stories. I need you.
Yeah.
I would love to just watch a YouTube video of Preston Dennett and Chad Meek talking to each other, and that would be fun.
Well,
stories.
Yeah, that'd be great. So, anyways, I'll be quiet, but enjoy the conversation, and it's been really great listening to you, Preston. And of course, I'm a big fan of Joe and his show and what he does. So, anyways, I'm going to shut up and I'm just going to listen from now on. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Chad.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Do you have definitely some similar experiences with that guy, don't you, Preston?
Oh yeah. I hope he's still listening and that he contacts me because I'd love to talk to him.
Yeah,
definitely should write a book. Oh my God.
Yeah, he's got a book out. Actually, I can send you the links and stuff. It's
oh yeah, definitely.
He's trying to get a movie together about the George Van Tassel story, and we're backing him. We've got billboards on the network and stuff, and we really believe in him. And he's just like your stories, man. We need to get it out there.
As far as the out of body healing, I've collected 20 different accounts of people who've been healed as a result of an out of body experience, and sometimes of chronic diseases. So that's totally rang a bell with me. I've had some amazing healing experiences. I was once taken to like a healing temple.
Oh wow! A healing temple in the astral realm.
Yeah, it was the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. Oh my God. It's kind of, well, not a super long story, but I certainly can go into it if you want. But that totally resonated with me, and a lot of what he was saying, really, like our own abilities, our untapped abilities. I think this is one of the reasons ETs are so interested in us, because we can do things they can't. We can see the future, talk to ghosts, go out of body, do all these things, and I'm not sure that all the ETs can do that in the same way. And certainly they seem to be very interested in that. Right. They seem to be very interested in our ability to do that and in our emotions and all about being human. Apparently it's something really great to be human and have the human experience.
I'm digging it so far.
Yeah, well, it's hard at times. I'm not going to lie. But
definitely.
But yeah, it is wild. It's a crazy experience. And I think that's part of the attraction. And our abilities are untapped. We are waking up right now in a huge way. And I think this is part of the ET agenda, like I talked about earlier. They're waking people up, and the ability to levitate and teleport. All this stuff could bust out into the mainstream and become wide open. And we are looking, I think, at two things that are on the edge, and that's disclosure and open official contact. Well, I think disclosure, as soon as disclosure happens, I bet that these guys come flooding in, and maybe before.
I can't wait, man. Well, we're going to, I think, get down to the end of the phone calls here. I got one more here that's been waiting a while. I'm pretty sure I know who this is because I want to talk to you or ask you a question about that temple. But let's take this call. He's been holding for a while. You're on the air with Preston Dennett. Who are we speaking with?
Glad to talk to you. Good
it's
evening.
Dino.
This is Dino.
What's up, Dino?
Yes. Hi, Preston. Preston,
hey, Dino.
I want to just say... I want to just say that having heard you on other programs and all, I mean, you definitely have a more down-to-earth style. Of course, I'm sure you have an open mind because you have done so much research. And unfortunately, I didn't get formally into researching these topics of the extraterrestrial, the exopolitics, of the strange phenomenon that's involved, and the cover-up. Until the internet radio shows started really happening in the last few years. So I will look to you, having not had personally any experience that I can relate to. I mean, I went to Contact in the Desert. I've been to Architects of the New Paradigm, and I'm trying to be open-minded and learn as much as I can. So therefore, my question to you, you've answered part of it tonight and on other shows, but I support Steve Bassett, especially for disclosure. But when disclosure comes, or even before it comes, what do you feel with all the books you've written, the stories you tell, some excellent stories that I have not heard elsewhere about the experience? I guess what I'm asking is, there are many different races supposedly that are coming here. Everybody seems to go to the default, the grays, the short grays, and they're robots. Oh, they're not. Oh, they're here for genetic material. But what is your feeling, Preston, with all the different races? Paul Hellyer says that now when he first heard about it, there were 4 that he knew about. Now there could be as many as 12. Most of them seem to be bipedal, but they're all different types. So Dan Sheehan was saying again last night on another program, we have to kind of get over all the different types and worrying about the different races. But I'm concerned about what are all the different agendas and why, which group do you think is taking the lead? And when disclosure comes, does it mean good or ill for the human race? Because I've heard of different agendas.
Right. Well, you're asking me to speculate, but I'm certainly happy to do it. I do think disclosure is coming. I think it's actually one of the ET's agendas. They're pushing it, and I would say that's evidenced by the Phoenix Lights and the sightings over Mexico City and the Hudson Valley wave and the Belgium wave, and I could go on. And I think it's probably closer than it's ever been. I'm guessing that what's holding back open official contact, and this is not a complete guess, I mean, this is kind of reflected in the stories of the people I've interviewed. What's holding back official contact is our own warlike ways, our inability to disclose and share the truth among everyone, and all the problems we're just having among ourselves in terms of, evolving as a sentient race and being less violent. That, I think, is the major obstacle that's preventing open official contact. I don't buy David Jacobs' theory that their hybrids are taking over and it's bad news. I think that, I really do believe the ETs are going to land at some point, and we're going to be welcomed to the Galactic Federation, and that there are various ET groups. There's not just the Greys. There's all kinds of Greys. There's the Nordics. We don't have a lot of an idea of what their society is like, but it appears that the Nordics kind of boss the Greys around. And above and beyond them are the praying mantis, who seem to be the most intelligent. I don't know if this is true, but there's some cases that seem to point towards this. So maybe they're the ones who are pushing this agenda of disclosure. This is something that a lot of people who are taking on board UFOs say, that this is coming and that there's going to be huge changes. And another thing I hear is we're moving to the fifth dimension, or the veil is thinning. And this is going to wake up all kinds of abilities and really kind of change the universe that we live in a substantial way. In what exact way that means, I'm not sure, other than perhaps, we become more spiritual, more psychic, more telepathic.
I hope you're right.
I don't think it's bad news. I don't think the ETs are here to hurt people. I don't think there's any evidence of that. There's no Nazi-like torture or sadism or I'm hurting you for fun. That's not their agenda at all. So I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful. I think they're very interested in the best things about being human. And I don't see it being a bad thing. I think it might be a tough transition because our world is a mess right now, and it's being choked by greed, and we're destroying our environment. And there's a lot of horrible things happening that I think the ETs are trying to stop. And perhaps there's an evil ET agenda out there, ETs who don't have our best interest in mind, who are hooked up with this whole greed, 1%ers or whoever's controlling the planet and causing wars, which are largely designed. So there's going to be a shift, and I think we're getting towards it, and it's going to be good news. It's going to be rough, but hopefully we'll get it done in time.
Well, I wanted your take on it, and you gave us that. I certainly do. You feel that when this comes, I hope it comes soon, I'm getting older, but that they would be willing, if not to interfere with our society, but be willing to give us health things. Like I have a couple of small chronic conditions that, some people say they're going to come and help and they'll hand you the cure for it. Do you think that they would be willing to do that, but yet not interfere with us?
Yeah, I think if it comes down to it, they absolutely might save people from a nuclear war. There's one lady I talked to, she was abducted and taken on board a UFO, and it flew down to this jungle area where a volcano was exploding, and she and a bunch of other people and ETs rescued all these people from this village right before and as the volcano was exploding. And she wakes up the next morning and turns on the news, and lo and behold, it's this volcano in Colombia that actually did explode.
Nice.
So they intervened and saved these people's lives. And I think that that's definitely a possibility. There's a lot of healings taking place. When I did UFOs over Nevada, that book, I researched Area 51 and found everything that I could about it at the time. And Fate magazine did this study where they asked remote viewers and out-of-body experiencers and psychics to research Area 51 psychically. And a bunch of people replied, all women, it turned out. And they had these amazing stories about how there's ETs down there and we're reverse engineering and all this stuff. But they also said something that I never heard before, and it was corroborated by several of them, that the people who work at Area 51 are being medically enhanced in some way and have implants and chips that are boosting their health. And a lot of them are going to live to be much, much older than the average human by far. And this sort of thing. So I think they do have that ability, and that is a definite possibility. And I wish they'd get their thing in gear. I think it's time.
All right.
Well, thank you for your thoughtful take on that, and thank you for allowing me to ask the questions there. I will hang up now and let you go on.
No problem, Dino. Anytime, brother.
Thanks, Dino.
All right. Good night.
Have a good one. That is the Don. They call Dino the Don. You know, Dino's been he's been in and out of this listening to shows and community. He's a big fan of yours, Preston, as we all are. But you know, we're kind of running short on time. I might do a few minutes of overtime. I don't really like to do that, but you talking about that astral temple, that healing temple, has got me real curious, brother. Well, talk to me about that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, whenever I go out of body, I try to have an agenda because that helps keep you conscious, helps you focus. Like say, I want to see my mother who's deceased, or I want to learn about a past life, this sort of thing. And I'd read about, this is how I do it. I read about something in Robert Monroe's book or William Buellman's or whoever. And I'm like, hey, I want to try that. I want to rescue a lost soul or whatever.
Yeah.
And I read about these healing temples. I'm like, hey, that sounds really cool. And I'm run down. I'm not, tired and feeling kind of unwell. And I thought this would be a great thing. So I found myself, at this point, I can actually induce it if I wake up at the right time of night or whatever. I think at that point, I'm like, I'm going to try this. And I did up the whole thing and then felt the vibrations and flew out of body. And what I usually do is I fly right through the roof and I hover above the house and I look around and I try to remember what I wanted to do. And so there I was, like hovering 50 feet up, and I remembered. I'm like, oh, healing temple. And so I shout out, or I kind of give a command. I go to a healing temple now, and try and make it very forceful, appealing to my spirit guides or what have you. And suddenly a force grabs me and takes my astral body in a spiraling pattern upwards, very slowly at first, and suddenly very fast, and I break through the barrier, is what I call it, to the other side. And I'm there. And you can always tell because the air is sparkly and it's really bright and it's gorgeous and you're not in a bad mood, and it's hard to describe. It's much more real than it is here. Very colorful, very vivid.
Is this what Robert Monroe calls locale 2? Or is it beyond that, you think?
I think this was probably a little bit beyond that. Because there's a place I go to meet deceased loved ones. And this seemed like a slightly higher vibration than that. But honestly, I don't know. I never was able to really figure out quite where I am.
Yeah.
There's levels.
Real vague names for it too, It's hard to explain, I guess.
There's levels, and you go through these barriers, and it gets more and more intense, and time collapses, and it gets crazy mystical towards, the higher you go. But this was a kind of a higher plane, I guess you would call it, and I'm looking down. It's very pastoral, very beautiful, lots of plants, very Earth-like, but just gorgeous and sparkling and amazing. And I see this building, which kind of looks like a grayish-black stone. It's a dome, and I'm thinking, wow, that looks interesting. Maybe that's it. And I'm taken right to it, right through the roof, and I realize it's huge. It's not just a small building. It's about the size of a school gymnasium. And I'm laid down in the center of it, on the floor on my back, and the floor, it was so strange, was composed of, I don't even know how to call it, cross-hatched bars, kind of like a waffle maker, or the stitching on the top of an apple pie, the crust.
Yeah, right.
Kind of woven like that. And one side would move one way, and the other side would move perpendicularly the other way. And it spun my body around in a circle, and this energy started pulsing through it. And meanwhile, I'm looking up at something that cannot be constructed on Earth. It is the most beautiful walls you've ever seen. They're made of this kind of filigree, looked like kind of a silver metallic filigree that was layered with these really intricate carvings and patterns that were actually too beautiful for me to withstand. And that kind of ended the experience for me. I got too emotional, and I'm like, oh my God, it's too pretty. I'm not worthy, that sort of thing. And that's kind of all I remember, other than waking up and feeling like I could almost frickin' fly. But it was amazing.
You have ran into lost souls in that realm, right? People that have just died or not sure what to do. I think I heard you talking about that once. Yeah,
I read about it. I'm like, hey, I want to try that. I don't think I've ever done that. It turned out I probably did and wasn't realizing it, because I would come upon these groups of people and they'd be like, you want to fly? You want to learn how to fly? That sort of thing. And I'd take them up and I'd bring them up to the other side. And I wasn't sure quite what was happening until I asked to have this experience. And I was taken to what I felt was underneath a house where this little girl had been buried, just this little blonde girl. It broke my heart. And she's just crying and looking at me. I'm like, you want to see your mommy? I don't know. or I said, do you want to fly? And she's kind of shy and scared. I'm like, you want to see your mom? I'll take you to your mom. And that got her. I grabbed her hand, and we were flying upwards, and I was taking her to the heavenly realms, right?
Right. Where they kind of just disappear, right? After you get to that point, they just kind of...
Yeah.
That's what Robert Monroe used to say. He would hold their hand, and he would try to hold them as long as he could, but once he got to that level, they would just disappear.
That's exactly what happened, too, and I knew it. So I'm, like, holding on really tight, and you can feel her little hand, in mine, and I'm like, and it wasn't long before, she just plain disappeared. I'm like, hey, darn it, because I wanted to see her mom, I wanted to see the heavenly realms and all that, but she was gone.
Well, I hope you don't mind just hanging out for a few more minutes, because there was a question I wanted to ask, and it has to do with Chapter 5. If you don't mind, it's what are the Wojays?
Oh, yeah. No, I don't mind at all. I love this chapter. This guy I talked to, Stan Hughes, is a full-blooded Native American. He's a blood Indian from the Seneca tribe in Canada, and has these amazingly benevolent encounters. Some of them Native American people I've talked to have a whole culture that with these Wojay, which are the star people or their alien ancestors, the people who they are directly related to. And
the star people, where have I heard that before?
Artie Six Killer Clark has probably mentioned this in her books. She focuses solely on indigenous people and their encounters. And certainly they talk about it, but Stan's encounters are so amazing. I mean, they're very interactive and very benevolent. He had one encounter. He'd go up to Lake Pend Oreille with his family. This is in the Idaho Panhandle in the northern United States. And they'd just picnic there and, have a good time in the wilderness and the scenery. But these UFOs kept showing up. Not every time, but often. Be 5 or 10 of them, sometimes more, sometimes less, and they'd be whizzing around and turning at right angles, and it was fun watching them until one day they're up there and they're just flying around like crazy, these nocturnal lights they call them, when one just drops down out of the sky and is right next to them, right above the lake, which they were overlooking, so it was kind of actually at eye level. And the little girl, in their group, the daughter, says, Daddy, Daddy, they're talking to me. I can hear them in my head. What should I say? And Stan, he says, tell them you love them. And so she says out loud, I love you. And at that moment, this UFO flares up really bright blue and comes towards them and flies low right over their heads.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's just the beginning of it. I mean, it went on and on. He had an encounter where he was camping out one evening, and this UFO shows up, and it starts getting closer and closer, and he starts to get really scared, this feeling of terror. And then it would back up, and then it would come closer, and the feeling of, terror would come back. And finally, after the 5th time or something, he realized it's trying to warn him, and doesn't know of what, though. He gets home and finds out there's a whole big family emergency with their son. And he didn't quite realize that's what it was, but it was obvious to him. They were warning him about that. And later on, they did a healing ceremony once, and with this son who was having, some emotional problems. And they did this Native American healing ceremony. And afterwards, this UFO, right immediately afterwards, when it's done, this UFO shows up over the whole group. Everyone sees it. It's got little lights all around it. The trees are shaking. And he stands like, they came to celebrate our healing ceremony, which is really cool. But that's nothing compared to what my favorite story that he told me, one of my favorite in the book, actually. And boy, if you want to talk to him, I'm sure he'd be willing. I've referred him to the radio shows before.
I'd definitely love to talk to him. If you can send him my contact or send me his contact info, yes, I'd definitely love to have him on.
Yeah, because he's got a lot of stories. He's, lots of really interesting spiritual stories as well, and has written some pretty interesting books, both fiction and nonfiction. But he had this experience where he's driving along with his dog near, I think it was Thunder Mountain. This is up in that same area, Washington and Idaho. And it's early morning, bright sunny day. This is a very kind of remote road. There's no traffic on it. When he starts to feel strangely sedate and kind of weirdly calm, and pulls over and hears this swishing sound over his car, and down out of the sky drops this huge silver sphere. It was like chrome, like, you know, an aluminum balloon or something, but perfect, and about the size of a truck, you know, large. It covered the whole road, and a door opens up, and out steps, he says, the most beautiful man he's ever seen. He went on about, this guy was so handsome. Mind you, Stan is married with kids. And he's like, this guy was gorgeous.
Must have been a Nordic.
Yeah, he was a Nordic, human-looking, Arabic, he said, with dark features, dark hair, not quite shoulder length, but a little bit longer than the average guy. Dark eyes, kind of a dark, not super dark complexion, a tight blue jumpsuit, muscular, and silver boots. And this just winning smile, and was looking right at him right in the eyes. Walks out of his craft, walks up to in front of the windshield, and is looking at him and raising his hand in greeting. And Stan's just overwhelmed and suffused with love and kinship. You know, he feels like, oh my God, this is the Woj, a first-hand encounter. And it's totally overwhelming. And he says, I want to go with you. You know, take me with you. And the guy's smile drops. I mean, he's like, his hand drops, this really loving look of sadness and longing comes into his eyes, and he turns and goes back into the ship, which takes off straight up and goes away. And Stan is overcome with sadness and grief and longing, and just could not believe it. And he's like, well, am I dreaming this? But he never fell asleep. He never woke up. His dog did not seem to notice. And, it was just gone. Came to say hi.
That's crazy. That's cool, though. It makes me wonder when they were talking about, the angelic beings and stuff in the scripture, if that's what they were talking about, you know?
I think that's a possibility, because there was one lady I talked to. I've never had her story published. I think I stopped to transcribe it, actually. I did a long interview with her. And she's like, I'm 67 years old and they're still abducting me. I've had a hysterectomy. I don't know why they want me. But she had this very interesting stuff to say. She said, because the ETs would talk to her. And they told her that they've been manipulating the human race for a long time genetically. And not only the human race, but animals as well. And in particular, cats and dogs, who they've given human emotions, is what they told her.
I believe that. I really do.
And I mean, if you think about it, that's kind of crazy, because we sure have this link with those animals and have for millennia. Science is showing like 30, 40,000 years, particularly with dogs. And God, they are emotional, aren't they?
Oh man, yeah. My cat now whines if I turn out the lights, my cat will start whining. If he's in another room, if I turn the light out, he'll whine and run into the room where I am at, because he don't want to be alone. Now that's not an animal thing. That's like that's a little kid, right?
Yeah, and this is what they told her. And getting back to the point of angels, they told her that a lot of the angelic accounts in our history were actually them, and that people have mistook them for angels. I'm not sure that that's true about all angels, because I've talked to some people, it seemed like classic angels and been rescued. And angel phenomena seems to be as real as, the demonic phenomena, which isn't related to UFOs. And I'm going to be firm on that. UFOs are not demons. Demons are not UFOs. The whole UFO phenomena is not demonic. Not to say that some UFOs, might not resonate with that, some ETs, and do bad things. But by and large, no. I studied demonology and demons and haunted houses and demonic infestations and possession, and it's a different phenomenon.
You do think that it is real, demons?
I'm not sure what to call them, because some people are willing to say, well, this is a demon. And it turns out, no, it's a human being, who's kind of forgotten his identity and gotten pulled into the dark ways and the evil side. But the classic explanation that demons are non-human beings, never been human. And I think there's a lot of evidence to speak towards it. And these hauntings, these dark hauntings, do seem to follow a very set pattern, as outlined in a number of books by like Ed and Lorraine Warren, and certainly they're not the only ones, but they were leaders in this field. And I think it's probably real. I'm not sure that the classic explanation is the correct one, but I don't think that the UFO phenomena is putting on different guises, masks, and that all paranormal phenomena are coming from one source. No, I think that's naive and anthropocentric. And any theory that puts us at the center has always been proven wrong. And that theory kind of does.
Well, I can hear it in your voice. All the books you have, all the stories you have. Isn't it? Do you find it frustrating? Like, because I haven't read the whole book, Inside UFOs, but reading through that book is profound. And then when you get on a radio show, you only have so much time to try to spit out what you're trying to get across to people. Do you ever find that frustrating?
Oh yeah, that's why I'm tumbling over my words and talking too fast.
Yeah. I've noticed that about you, because you have a real exciting type voice. Like, you've got this story that you want to tell, and while you're telling the story, you've got 10 other in the back of your brain. Tell them about this one, right? Tell them about this one. And I can hear it in your voice, man. And so I recommend, I hope you keep writing. I hope you never stop writing. And everybody out there should definitely go pick up his books. I'm going to read this one, and my next one, you know what I'm going to get, right? I'm obsessed with astral travel. That'll probably be my next one I get from you.
Oh, good. That's one of my, people love that book in terms of, how successful my books have been. That's right up there at the top of the list. And it's funny, and I think a good read. So
now I'm going to ask you
to hear what you think.
Right. I will. I'll definitely do. I'll actually do a review on the website about it too. I've been trying to catch up on that, on all the books I read. I've got a section on my website called books that I've actually read, and I've got like 12 books I've got to put up there, but because I'm lazy, and that's what I was going to ask you, is a selfish question here. Do you think you would ever consider, and maybe you already have, and I don't know it, but do you think you would ever consider putting these books into audio format for like Audible?
Someone just asked me that yesterday. That's like the first time anyone's ever asked me that. It's so funny.
I would love it.
Yeah, I was thinking that would be a great idea. I'm like, why haven't I done that? I basically just haven't done it because I haven't thought of it, and pretty busy and want to get the next book out. But that's a great idea. I see a lot of people are doing that, and I have friends who love audiobooks.
Now, I don't know what it entails. Some people go out and they hire, like the guy that did all of Robert Monroe's books. I listen to on Audible. William Buellman's books, Audible, right? I'm a lazy reader. Like I was telling you before the show, unless the book is easy to read. And when I say that, I don't mean that from a third grade point of view. What I mean is it catches you, right? And your books definitely do that. And speaking of that, and I'm going to try to wrap this up because I know we're 15 minutes into overtime here. Nobody else is complaining about it except me, I guess. So that's cool. I appreciate that, guys. But this book you're working on next? Now, I know Dave scooped you a little bit, but can you give us any more hints about it?
Absolutely. It's not done yet, and the research is just continuing to explode. But I can tell you offhand, that there's well over 100 USO cases, which would be strictly defined as objects either floating on the water or going in or out of the water, or both. And some really amazing humanoid cases. The guy I'm hoping to interview tomorrow, I did an initial interview, which I didn't record. This is kind of one of the ways I do my interviews. I do a preliminary interview. But boy, his story, tell you it in a nutshell. It's one of the more amazing ones. I can't wait to get the whole story. But he was with a large group of people, doing a birthday party or something like that at Leo Carrillo Beach, which is right where all this is happening. It's in the heart of Malibu, really close to this alleged base that's on Google Maps. And they all see this weird light out in the water. with stacks of light, colored lights, and they're all trying to figure out what it is when it shines this hugely bright light on the whole beach and the cliffside behind them. And that's when these guys, very much identical looking, but not twins, come down the staircase where the cliff is. They're all dressed in blue jumpsuits. They're all kind of shortish, 5 feet, maybe 5'5", and kind of Asian or Indian looking or slightly exotic. Not your typical Caucasian is what I mean. And start walking among the group in a weird way and climbing over the lifeguard houses. Mm-hmm. And the whole party's like, who are these guys and what are they doing? When suddenly they all have missing time. The next thing they know, the lights out in the ocean are gone, the men are gone, the figures, and they're all standing in this row, 2 rows actually, looking towards the water, and there's no footprints around it, and all the sand is smooth clean except for these weird rings, one around each person. So that's a story that probably he's never told anybody publicly, but has agreed to be interviewed and when he heard about my research into this area. So I've got a lot of weird stories like that with humanoids and just some landings and just some real crazy stuff, including people who I think were actually taken into this undersea base or underground base in that area.
Yeah, I know Dave Cruz was, when he talked to me about that before, it's just another story that when you hear it at first, you say, come on, right? And then you go actually looking into it and researching it and talking to people, and then you find out, all right, it's time to stop taking everything with a skeptical point of view so much so that it blinds you from what's really going on. So yeah, I can't wait for that book to come out. That's going to be cool.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a bit of research still because it's unfolding, but I can't wait either. I'm hoping to get it out as soon as possible. UFOs over Colorado is coming next.
Nice.
And I want to put out Not From Here Volume 3, which these are all kind of collections of articles I've written over the years for UFO magazines. And I'm updating the articles and putting them in book form. So, before the whole research gets lost. Half of my research almost was just in articles and not in the books. So
that makes sense. That's actually a good idea.
Right. And they're having a great response. I mean, the response I'm getting to those books is awesome. And so excited, getting all kinds of really interesting stories that are corroborating them. So, yeah, I'm having so much fun with this. I have to tell you, God, right now it's just so much fun right now.
Now, how I'm going to kind of wrap it up with this because there's a lot of people that don't have experiences and stuff. How, and I believe this is an important question, how important is hypnosis to you? This is actually something that I was wanting to ask you from the beginning because I think it can take us, especially for us that don't have experiences or don't know how to dig into that, take us to the next level to see these things. Do you actually believe in that method?
Oh, yeah. I'm a huge supporter of hypnosis. Several researchers use this regularly. I mean, Yvonne Smith and Barbara Lamb, whom I both know quite well, use it regularly, and it works. It's been proven to work in police cases. Mythbusters, do you remember that show where they test various myths? They did a show on it where they staged an incident for their staff, the crew there, and then put them all under regressive hypnosis to see if they could recall it accurately. And yes, they did, and they recalled details that they could not consciously recall. So we know it works. And I'm absolutely convinced there's no problem with, disinformation or fantasizing or confabulation or false memory syndrome. I don't think that's what we're seeing at all because these stories match exactly, for the most part, the conscious memories, the fully conscious ones.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm a huge supporter of it. But, that said, I don't always jump and say, oh, you got to go under hypnosis. Mm-hmm. And because what happens is they go there and what they get is a hypnotically recalled memory. It's not conscious memory. And there's still that little shadow of like, gosh, is this real? A lot of people still find themselves second guessing it. it's not necessarily a magic pill, and also it can open up a can of worms. Suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, it's not one abduction, it's going on my entire life, and it can really kind of open up a door that you have to be ready to handle. But yeah, I think it's a great idea, and I've referred people to hypnosis, and I've talked to people who've gone under it. Only 2 cases in this book, though, involve hypnosis, because I wanted to stay away from the controversy, and I wanted to prove to people that this is not relying on regressive hypnosis. Mm-hmm. It's a great tool, but UFO abduction stories are not coming from regressive hypnosis. They're coming from fully conscious memories. Certainly some of them.
Yeah, and the ancient sages of the past used to use it to focus and astral travel and scry and try to manifest things too. So there's definitely something when you tap into that subconscious realm. It's almost like a doorway to that next realm. There's something to it.
Oh yeah, the whole universe is kind of based on thought, and if you can master your own mind, do your own mind control over yourself. Self-hypnosis is absolutely a great tool. It's just meditation, really, and opens up all these abilities. Hypnosis is not something to be feared unless you get in the hands of some evil madman or some person with absolutely no ethics who can abuse it. Absolutely. But I think it's a great tool.
Well, Preston, unfortunately, man, we're going to have to wrap this up, and I really hope that, I know you're busy and I know you're doing a lot, but I would love to have you back on the show, and I'm sure our listeners would too. When you get that next book out or when you get time, come talk to us, man. It's always fun, and it's real fun talking to you.
Hey, yeah, anytime. I want to put out another book on astral travel too, because I've got a bunch more, since I wrote that first book.
That'd be great.
A lot of books. A lot of books I want to plan.
And where can people find you? I'm sure you can just type in Preston Dennett on Google, but your main website is, you have a Weebly website, correct?
Right, PrestonDennett.weebly.com. Will take you there. Or, just type in my name, and I got all my books there and excerpts, and if anyone wants to contact me, they can contact me through my website. And the books are also available on Amazon.com. But, I really appreciate you having me on the show.
That's not a problem. Really consider that Audible thing. If, that's because I'm selfish. I know you're going to wake up tomorrow and go, you know what, I'm going to make an audio book just for Joe Roop, That's how lazy I am, man. But I get all the way through every book I've ever put on Audible. And I've listened to Robert Monroe's books. I could tell you, it's like a 24-hour series, all 3 books, and I've went through it I don't know how many times, just like you have,
Well, that's funny because I just got that message, and now here you're giving it to me again. So I think the universe is saying maybe you should look into that. So, sounds like fun.
Well, thanks again, man, for coming on, and we hope to have you back. And that's end of the show, everybody. Tomorrow night, you guys can check out Dave has got something special in for you guys. He's doing a best of Contact in the Desert, the best of 2016, the Fader House. For anybody that wants to tune in with a live chat, there's going to be some highlights from Richard Dolan, Mike Barra, and Jimmy Church, and I believe he dropped it in the speaker chat room. Wolfman's coming on next with his interview with the Spook. Next week, we're going to have Joe Cerletti, and on the 21st, we have Sebastian Martin coming on the show, and look forward to that, and lots more to come for you guys here on the network. And Preston, thanks again, man, for coming out. It's been awesome.
Thanks, Joe.
No problem. See you guys.